Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 2 based on novel. So let's start. Under the attention of the surrounding onlookers, the youth slowly walked out from within the group of Tao sect disciples and stood at a position not far from Lei Chen. There was no fear on the youth's face. Instead, a smile had appeared. Who is he? Numerous people in the surrounding crowd were somewhat shocked as they watched Lindong walk out. They had originally assumed that the person to take action would be either Ying Xiaoxiao or Wang Yang. After all, amongst the Tao sect disciples, only the two of them were qualified to cross blows with Lei Chen. It was clear that the youth before them was not someone they recognized. Wang Yang, letting a newcomer do your dirty work. Do you think that I'm a merciful and benevolent person? Mocked Lei Chen after he shot a glance at Lindong. Upon hearing Lei Chen's words, the Yuan Gate disciples behind him started to roar with laughter while they shot ridiculing glances at Lindong. Tao sect's Lindong, please treat me well, said Lindong with a faint smile as he cupped his hands towards Lei Chen. Lindong? Upon hearing this name, it was obvious that Lei Chen was startled, while the roaring laughter from the Yuan Gate disciples immediately died down as they shot astonished looks at Lindong. From their appearance, it was obvious that they had heard of this name before. He is the Lindong that defeated Yao Ling, exclaimed Jiang Dao in shock. So you do have some reputation. Lei Chen was slightly startled, however, he regained his wits in the next instant. With a faint smile, he extended his hand. At the center of the palm was the jade hairpin that was emitting a faint fluorescence. I am somewhat interested in you. Since you want to stand out, I'll give you the opportunity to do so. As long as you are able to snatch this from my hand, what I've said previously will still stand. Lei Chen's eyes were glued onto Lindong, while the corners of his mouth pulled back slowly to form a chilling arc. However, I have to remind you that if Lei Chen, were to take action, I will definitely not show any mercy. In the case whereby you are beaten to death or crippled by me, you can only count yourself unlucky. Hearing those words, Lindong merely smiled. However, an icy cold chilling intent started to surge out from within the depths of his eyes. As the two stood and stared at each other, the surrounding onlookers immediately retreated and formed an expansive circle with the two of them within it. In the next instant, innumerable curious gazes focused on the both of them. Everyone wanted to see what methods the new disciple from Tao sect would use to snatch that hairpin from Lei Chen, one of the three little kings of Yuan Gate. Lindong, please be careful, said Ying Xiaoxiao somewhat worriedly as she stared at Lindong's back. Lindong gently nodded his head. Soon after, he no longer hesitated and took a step forward. In the next instant, his eyes suddenly turned serious as boundless Yuan power swept out from him. His figure transformed directly into a shadow and shot straight at Lei Chen. From the looks of it, he was actually going to confront Lei Chen head-on. He's courting death. Looking at Lindong's action, a few Yuan Gate disciples immediately started to laugh and comment sarcastically. Lindong's strength was merely at the 7 Yuan Nirvana stage. Even if his combat prowess was extraordinary, Lei Chen was much stronger than Yao Ling. Even Ying Xiaoxiao, Wang Yang, and the rest wrinkled their brows upon seeing Lindong's actions. However, they did not say anything. They had a rather good understanding of him and knew that Lindong would not act thoughtlessly. Since he had chosen to do things in this manner, he must have taken everything into consideration. Kai. As the shadow rapidly grew larger in Lei Chen's eyes, a cold grin appeared on his face. In the next moment, a resplendent lighting glow appeared once again on his body. The berserk Yuan power fluctuation that erupted was far stronger than any ordinary 9 Yuan Nirvana stage practitioner. You are quite fast. It's a pity that such a thing is useless against me. Words of ridicule rang out from Lei Chen's mouth before his face suddenly turned chilly. Taking a step forward, the resplendent lighting glow fluctuated wildly before transforming into a lighting lion head on his fist that raised its head and roared at the skies. Thundering lion fist! Lei Chen's fist rumbled forth, immediately causing a deep lion's roar and a sound of thunder to spread outwards from his fist. A lighting glow fluctuation that was visible to the naked eye swept forward, causing the ground to instantly crack into a web-like network of fissures. Lei Chen's attack was quite vicious and he did not have any intention of going easy on Lindong. If his fist was to connect, even a 9-yuan Nirvana stage expert would suffer serious injuries. Swish! Both of them were extremely quick and violent. In less than a breath's time, the two figures collided violently like two meteorites. In such a collision, it was obvious that Lindong would be in a disadvantage since Lei Chen's fist was sufficient to completely wreck him. However, facing this absolute disadvantage, not a trace of panic was present on Lindong's face. His black pupils were still calm and limpid without showing any signs of being disturbed. The berserk lighting glow from the lion fist grew rapidly in size within Lindong's eyes. Just as everyone's hearts were abruptly raised in anticipation, a strange smile appeared at the corners of Lindong's mouth. His hand suddenly formed a weird seal before a fluctuation started to erupt. Just as the thundering lion fist was about to hit Lindong's chest, it strangely froze. It merely froze for an instant, however, when experts fought, an instant was enough to determine the victor. Swish! Just as the glowing fist was about to condense, Lindong's body had flashed past Lei Chen's like a phantom. Bang! Just as the two figures crossed each other, an unusually low and stuffy sound suddenly rang out. In the next moment, the pupils of the innumerable people in the surroundings instantaneously contracted. They were overwhelmed with shock that had crawled out from the depths of their eyes. This was because they saw Lei Chen's face suddenly turn red after the two figures crossed paths. In the next moment, an incomparably enormous force exploded on his chest, causing him to fly backwards. In the end, he slammed heavily against a gigantic boulder. The frightening force caused the entire boulder to shatter into pieces. The entire place was deathly silent. The originally mocking expressions on the Yuan Gate disciples instantly turned sluggish. They stared blankly at the peculiar scene before them. They simply could not understand what had occurred when the two figures crossed paths with one another. The one who should have been sent flying should have been the brat from Dao sect. This? Ying Xiaoxiao, Wang Yang and the rest were all similarly stunned by this sight. Even they had no idea what exactly had happened in that instant. The originally explosive fight appeared to have been stifled by this strange situation. Amidst the deathly silence, one gaze after another that was somewhat overwhelmed in shock moved and focused on the skinny figure that had crossed by Lei Chen. At this moment, there was not a single injury on his body. It was as if the berserk fist of Lei Chen had not even touched his body. Bang! Lei Chen's sorry figure climbed out from the rubble a distance away and stood up. One could see a dark red palm print on his chest, while a furious and malevolent expression had replaced the previous expression on his face. His eyes turned scarlet as he stared at the figure in the distance before roaring, "Your father will tear you apart today." As he roared, his figure looked just like an enraged wild beast as he charged straight at Lindong. His fearsome murderous aura made the skin on one's scalp crawl. However, just as he had charged a dozen steps forward, he suddenly froze. That was because he could see Lindong, who was at a distance away, extending his hand towards him. Within his hand was a jade hairpin that sat safely while faintly blossoming with radiance, as if it was continuously ridiculing Lei Chen while it sparkled. That hairpin had already been snatched away. Every surrounding onlooker could not help but involuntarily open their mouths a little wider while the Yuan Gate disciples' eyes were wide like a drowning individual with a face filled with fright. As a breeze blew past the area, rolling up some dust which floated away, it left a group of dumbfounded people. Originally they had assumed that it would be a brilliant match. However, it had ended in such an amusing manner. Such an ending had obviously exceeded everyone's expectations, including Lei Chen's. Therefore, when he saw the hairpin in Lindong's hand, an incredulous expression appeared on his face. "You should pay up," said Lindong casually as he shot a look at Lei Chen while playing with the hairpin in his hand. His voice slowly spread, causing this entire area to turn even more quiet. At a pavilion far away, the deep and clear eyes of a cold and gorgeous lady slowly revealed a shocked expression at this instant. "What is going on?" Within the pavilion, the handsome man had a grave expression on his face as he stared at the deathly silent area in the distance before muttering in bewilderment. It was obvious that even he had failed to realize what exactly had happened in that previous exchange. He used some special means and froze Lei Chen for an instant. In that instant, Lindong evaded his attack and gave a palm attack to him before snatching away the hairpin, said Lingqing Xu in a soft voice as she stared at the youthful figure in the distance with her clear eyes. The expression on the man's face changed slightly as he was simply unable to believe that Lindong was able to do so many things in such a short moment. His speed and judgment was truly astonishing. This Dao sect disciple is truly not simple, muttered the man with a grave expression on his face. He knew that if he was in Qian Lei's shoes, he would likely be in an even worse state. Lingqing Xu's slender eyelashes fluttered as she gently blinked. Her eyelids covered the sliver of complex emotions that surged out from within her eyes. That scene from before that happened in a flash was sufficient to shock many people. This was especially true for her since she knew about Lindong's background. The shock that she had received was undoubtedly even greater. Who would have thought that the youth from a branch family in such a low-rank empire would actually be able to reach this stage today? Perhaps the strength that Lindong displayed today was not sufficient to cause Lingqing Xu to be terrified. However, his progress was enough to cause emotions to flood her mind. That immature and weak youth had eventually accomplished what he had declared in the past. Lingqing Xu gently bit her lips with her pearly white teeth. After a while, even with her quiet and cold temperament, she was still unable to resist as she softly sighed. It was obvious that her tranquil lake-esque state of mind was now thrown into disarray by the familiar figure that had once again appeared before her. Such a thing rarely occurred to her. Furthermore, it had occurred again because of the same man. Please pay up. As Lindong's mockery-filled voice echoed across the now deathly silent area, an incredulous expression appeared on everyone's faces. In the next moment, gaze after gaze could not help but to focus on Lei Chen. Right now, his expression was fluctuating, while the dark look in his eyes was so rich that it could not be erased. The Little Thunder King, one of the 3 little kings of Yuan Gate, was actually made a fool of in this place. In the previous lightning-quick exchange, even Lei Chen himself could only feel his body freeze for an instant. In the next instance, a palm attack had viciously struck his chest. From start to finish, he had not even made contact with the corner of Lindong's clothes. This was undoubtedly an utter humiliation for Lei Chen. "You courting death?" The fluctuating expression on Lei Chen's face finally condensed on the sinister side. He roared in a low voice as he stared at Lindong with anger erupting from his eyes. The members of Yuan Gate truly have no morals. They can't even keep the most basic promises, said Lindong with a faint smile. Upon hearing these words, quite a number of the surrounding onlookers nodded their heads. As spectators, they were clearly aware of how the entire matter had played out. The deal was initiated by Lei Chen himself. If he failed to make good on his own promise, he would definitely seem a little despicable. Furthermore, he was a disciple of the strongest sect in Eastern Xian region. Even though no one dared to mock him due to the prestige and might attached to the Yuan Gate's name, their ridiculing gazes caused Lei Chen and the Yuan Gate disciples' expression to turn unnatural. "Fine, I admit defeat, brat. You better pray that you don't meet our Yuan Gate after the great sect competition begins." Lei Chen sucked in a deep breath to suppress his raging emotions, before he suddenly said to Lindong in a menacing manner. Lindong gave a faint smile. Upon seeing his appearance, the anger in Lei Chen's heart almost reached a point whereby his head was about to explode. "How many Nirvana pills?" Lei Chen forcefully turned around, refusing to look at the smile on Lindong's face that would likely drive him insane. With a gloomy expression on his face, he looked towards the boulder where a middle-aged man sat under a light barrier. He was the owner of the stall that was selling the hairpin soul treasure. With great enthusiasm, he had watched the fight between Lindong and Lei Chen from start to the end. "It's not expensive." 6 million Nirvana pills, said the middle-aged man in grey. When he looked at Lei Chen's gloomy expression, there was not a single trace of fear in his eyes. Instead, he had a grin on his face. "Bullshit, when I heard you discussing the price with her previously, it was only 3 million nirvana pill. Jiang Dao instantly exclaimed in rage upon hearing the man's words. The middle-aged man in grey lazily shot a look at Jiang Dao and ignored him. As someone who was able to survive in unique Devil City, he was definitely capable. Although Yuan Gate had a domineering reputation, it did not intimidate people like him. Lei Chen stared darkly at the middle-aged man in grey. However, in the end, he did not explode in anger. With a jerk of his hand, a lighting glow that contained a frightening amount of force appeared and shot viciously towards him. Bang! In response to Lei Chen's attack, the middle-aged man merely smiled. Boundless yuan power rushed forth in his palm, before he sent it colliding against the lighting glow. As the lighting glow scattered, it transformed into a silver qiankun bag. Oh, many thanks. Sweeping his gaze across the qiankun bag in his hand, the middle-aged man gave a faint smile before speaking. Lei Chen's eyes focused a little as he shot a look at the middle-aged man. Without the slightest intention of saying any other unnecessary words, he turned his body and coldly shot a look at Lindong. I hope that your Dao sect will not be as useless as the previous time, if not. Go? As Lei Chen's gloomy voice sounded out, he promptly waved his hand and led the gloomy Yuan Gate disciples and pushed their way out of the crowd. Rapidly disappearing into the distance, they looked as if they were fleeing with their tails tucked between their legs. Mighty senior brother Lindong. After the Yuan Gate disciples left, celebratory noises immediately erupted amongst the Dao sect disciples. Quite a number of them were extremely excited. After all, numerous small-scale and large-scale clashes had occurred between Yuan Gate and Dao sect over the years. However, they rarely managed to gain the upper hand. Hence, after Lindong thwarted Lei Chen this time, they all felt joyous and excited. Lindong smiled. Promptly, he turned around and tossed the jade hairpin in his hand to Ying Huan and said, "Here, treat this as a gift from me." Ying Huan carefully received the hairpin as her face turned slightly red. Raising her head, she sent a sweet smile towards Lindong. Her lovable appearance was unexpectedly different from the little sprite she usually was. "Such formidable means, you have hidden yourself very deeply," said Wang Yang as he walked over. His voice contained amazement and a rarely seen excitement. Lindong smiled while shaking his head. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly turned his head and slightly raised his line of sight as if he had sensed something. As he looked at the top floor of a distant pavilion, he saw a quiet, cold and aloof figure dressed in white clothes appear within his sights. At that moment, the smile on his face slowly started to stiffen. Though they were a distance away, two pairs of eyes met in midair. Instantly, both their bodies froze, while a complicated expression surged in their hearts. Lindong's movements was obviously discovered by Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest. As they followed his gaze into the distance and spotted the quiet and cold figure, the expressions on their faces slightly changed. "That's Lingqing Xu from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. As expected, she is the leader for the Great Sect competition this time," said Wang Yang in a soft voice. As he stared at that beautiful figure, a fluctuation appeared even in a heart like his that was already somewhat numbed. "That lady is truly bewitching. She has completely bewitched countless genius from various super sects in Eastern Xian region. However, up till now, no one has managed to move her heart." Wang Yang smacked his lips before suddenly realizing that there was something amiss about the surrounding atmosphere. In the next moment, he seemingly felt an uproar spreading out from around him. Raising his head, he saw that the beautiful figure in a white snow-like dress had unexpectedly floated over from the pavilion. Under the attention of the crowd, she gradually descended in front of Lindong. The cheering noises from the Dao sect disciples spontaneously came to a halt, as all of them stared in amazement at the most famous female younger generation member in Eastern Xian region. Under the crowd's attention, she finally landed in front of Lindong. Without saying anything, she quietly stared at Lindong with her clear and cold eyes. This scene caused the surrounding atmosphere to turn exceedingly strange. Under that strange atmosphere, Lindong suddenly took a deep breath and smiled. In the next moment, he extended a hand towards Lingqing Xu as a complicated laughter rang out. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lindong from the Great Yang Empire. Lindong's laughter had a somewhat complicated flavor to it as it echoed across the somewhat quiet treasure-seeking district. Soon after, quite a number of people looked towards the hand he had extended towards Lingqing Xu, and were all momentarily stunned. Did this fellow not know just who was standing before him? She was one of the most dazzling members of the younger generation in Eastern Xian region. Countless young geniuses from various super sects had tried everything in their power just to make this beauty smile. However, not a single person could get close to her to this day. Yet, this fellow actually extended his hand in such a manner. Who did he think he was? Of course, they were not the only ones who felt so. Even Wang Yang, Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest were stunned by Lindong's actions. If she ignored him in front of such a huge crowd, wouldn't he end up making a fool of himself? However, Lindong completely ignored the various strange gazes from around him. His eyes merely contained a trace of complicated feelings as he quietly stared at this beautiful lady, who seemed to have become even colder and prettier as compared to 5 years ago. The scene from back then once again surged out from deep within his mind. It was as though it had occurred yesterday. Lingqing Xu's clear eyes were also staring at Lindong. His young face no longer possessed the same childish glow from back then. Moreover, when he looked at her, his bright eyes no longer avoided her own. This was because the current him had the qualifications to ignore the dazzling halo around her. It was an exchange of gazes of equals. Lingqing Xu's eyelashes gently blinked. She was aware of just how much effort this young man before her had put in over the past 5 years in order to reach this stage. 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace, Lingqing Xu. Her quiet lake-like eyes finally rippled slightly at this moment. After which, Lingqing Xu extended her delicate hand in front of those numerous stunned eyes and gently shook Lindong's hand. The touch between the two of them was as cool as jade, while unease flowed under that calm surface. The touch of their hands was as icy smooth as jade, while a coldness appeared to seep into their bones. At this moment, the sunlight was scattering down from high above in the sky, appearing just like a light pillar that wrapped around the two. This scene was somewhat dazzling. However, their gentle handshake merely lasted for a moment, before both parties simultaneously withdrew their hands. Lindong could sense the surrounding gazes instantly turn searing hot after he withdrew his hand. It appeared as though they wanted to pierce thousands of holes into his body. Congratulations. You have accomplished what you promised back then. Lingqing Xu withdrew her hand into her sleeve. Her hand was curled slightly and appeared slightly moist. After which, she looked at the young man before her and softly said, "I was wrong." Lindong's mouth parted into a smile. To make a prideful lady like her utter such words, the sense of achievement that he felt was even more pleasant than having forced Lei Chen to withdraw miserably earlier. "Don't worry, I do not dare to say that statement yet," Lindong smilingly said. He could vaguely sense a powerful ripple from within Lingqing Xu's body. That fluctuation was even stronger than Lei Chen's. Clearly, there was still a gap between the current him and her despite his best efforts. If you say it, it is likely that you will not be able to participate in the great sect competition. Lingqing Xu replied in an indifferent manner. However, the fluctuation that flashed across her clear eyes quietly revealed that she was indeed a little affected by his words. The onlookers were all baffled by their conversation. However, the two of them understood it very well. Both of them clearly knew that if Lindong was to utter those words now, it would end up causing a frightening commotion. Lindong would also likely become a thorn in the eyes of many young geniuses from various super sects. This was obviously neither the time nor the place to display his youthful arrogance. Perform well during the great sect competition. It is not easy to deal with Yuan Gate. Lingqing Xu was clearly not accustomed to speaking for so long with a man in front of such a large crowd. Hence, she merely softly spoke those words before turning around to leave. "I will find an opportunity to utter those words," Lindong suddenly said as he watched Lingqing Xu turn around. "You should say it after you are certain that you can keep your life after saying them." Lingqing Xu's body paused. After which, her toes pressed gently on the ground. She immediately turned into a ray of light that quickly rushed off into the distance. After Lingqing Xu's departure, the eyes of this entire district immediately gathered on Lindong. Although the conversation between the two of them was completely baffling, it seemed to imply that this was not the first time that Lindong and Lingqing Xu had met. Moreover, their conversation indicated that they did not have a simple relationship. There was something fishy between the two of them. Some looked at each other and formed a conclusion that caused them to feel extreme displeasure in their hearts. "He is actually acquainted with Lingqing Xu," Wang Yang muttered in shock. Ying Xiaoxiao nodded slightly. She glanced at Lindong's back in a peculiar manner. After which, she turned her head and looked at the young lady beside her, who had suddenly turned mute. "Are you all right?" Ying Xiaoxiao softly sighed within her heart. It was likely that quite a number of young ladies would feel deflated in front of Lingqing Xu, who was outstanding in every aspect. The young lady gently shook her head in front of Ying Xiaoxiao's eyes. Soon after, she lifted her lips. She raised her head, her large eyes staring at the spot where Lingqing Xu had disappeared. After which, she turned her head and softly said to Ying Xiaoxiao, "I will become even more outstanding than her." Ying Xiaoxiao was momentarily startled. When she looked at that young lady's bright and beautiful face, she seemed to see an icy blue hue rising in the latter's eyes bit by bit. Ying Xiaoxiao was somewhat taken aback. It truly seemed as if the young lady before her would undergo a complete metamorphosis one day. At that time, it was likely that she would become even more dazzling than Lingqing Xu. "Big sis believes in you." Ying Xiaoxiao did not know where this emotion sprouted from. However, she was clearly quite pleased when she saw that Ying Huanhuan did not feel dejected because of Lingqing Xu's appearance. Immediately, she rubbed the young lady's head and softly laughed. Ying Huanhuan laughed sweetly, while the icy blue hue within her eyes quietly disappeared. However, it was likely that even she herself might not have sensed that in the depths of her pupils, jet black had slowly started to merge with that icy blue. Due to Lingqing Xu's appearance, this young lady, who typically went with the flow, seemed to have awoken the pride deep within her bones, and this caused certain changes within her to accelerate. At this moment, Lindong had also withdrawn his gaze. He immediately inhaled a deep breath of air. The meeting 5 years later was not as explosive as he had imagined. The two of them had calmly looked at each other and conversed in a calm manner. After which, they had parted in a similarly calm manner. However, this was good. Lindong smiled. Although the current him was completely different compared to 5 years ago, he was still not very stunning in the eyes of Lingqing Xu, whose eyes were already used to seeing countless geniuses. The reason the latter had displayed such emotion was likely because of how vastly different Lindong's status and power was now compared to 5 years ago. Although the unexpected occurrence back then forced the two of them into an absurd situation that caught them both off guard, Lindong was not foolish enough to believe that a lady like Lingqing Xu would swear her undying love to him because of such an incident. A proud phoenix like her would never be retained by even the most gorgeous sycamore tree. Lindong turned around and saw those strange gazes that Wang Yang's group were directing at him. He involuntarily coughed dryly and spread out his hands. "You know her?" Wang Yang involuntarily asked. He felt like he was speaking too much today. It was as though he had completely changed from his usual quiet and lonely self. However, he had no choice. The feats that Lindong had accomplished today caused him to involuntarily speak a little more. "We met once 5 years ago in Great Yang Empire." Lindong gently nodded and said. Wang Yang, Ying Xiaoxiao and the others exchanged glances. They clearly did not expect that the two of them had met 5 years ago. However, there should have been a huge difference in status between the two of them back then. Yet, they had still met. The group wondered just what happened between the both of them. From the looks it was obvious that it was no ordinary meeting. "Let's go. We should also head back." Lindong did not dwell on this topic. He immediately waved his hand and was just about to leave when his eyes drifted towards the stone within the light barrier where the grey-clothed middle-aged man was at earlier. At this moment, there were over a dozen light clusters on the stone. A powerful fluctuation was being emitted from those light clusters. Clearly, they were powerful soul treasures. However, Lindong's eyes did not linger for long on those light clusters. Instead, his eyes shifted and finally landed in a corner. There was a somewhat dimmer light cluster at that spot. The light cluster contained a palm-sized dark red damaged copper cauldron. The stone talisman within his body seemed to ripple when Lindong's eyes landed on the dark red damaged copper cauldron. That fluctuation was extremely slight, but it was still detected by Lindong. Immediately, his eyes focused in an unnoticeable fashion. In the next moment, after a slight hesitation, he lifted his foot and walked forward. He did not hide his intention as he held the copper cauldron in his hand. Immediately, he lifted his head and smiled towards that grey-clothed middle-aged man. What is the price of this object? This video will end here.